I am Melissa Carter, 31 years old, and last night at a family dinner in Chicago. My father looked across the table, his voice sharp and cold, and told me in front of everyone, "You will never inherit a dime from me." The words pierced through me like glass, and for a moment I could not breathe. My hands began to tremble beneath the table, my cheeks burned with heat, and a heavy tightness pressed against my chest. Around me, the room seemed to blur, my mother's silence, my sister's smirk, my relatives shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Shame wrapped around me like a heavy cloak, crushing and suffocating. But what no one at that table knew was that my father's declaration would not be the final word. The night was far from over, and the truth waiting just beyond that door would change everything. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to know, what city are you listening from, and what time is it right now? And please subscribe to support my channel. It keeps these stories alive. If you want to understand why those words shattered me so deeply, you need to know the story of my family. My father, Richard Carter, is a man who built his empire with ruthless precision. He made his fortune in real estate, and with every dollar he earned, his sense of control over us grew tighter. In our household, his word was law. My mother, Evelyn, lived in the shadows of his decisions. She was gentle, soft-spoken, and always the peacekeeper, but she rarely dared to challenge him. When she did, his glare alone was enough to silence her. Then there was my sister, Amanda, the golden child. 3 years younger than me, she was the one who could do no wrong. Growing up, she was showered with gifts, praise, and opportunities, even when she barely lifted a finger. I, on the other hand, was always the afterthought. If I earned an A in school, my father would say, "That is what is expected." If Amanda scraped by with a C, he would beam, pat her head, and say, "You tried your best, sweetheart." By the time we were adults, the pattern had only deepened. Amanda failed out of college twice before finally getting a degree my father practically purchased for her. Meanwhile, I worked 3 jobs to pay my tuition and graduated with honors. But at the graduation dinner, my father raised his glass only to toast Amanda for supporting her sister. That moment still burns in my memory. I built my independence quietly. I moved out young, rented a small apartment in a less glamorous part of Chicago, and carved my career in nonprofit work. I was not wealthy like my father, but I was proud of every dollar I earned, honestly. Still, in family gatherings, I was made to feel small. My father would smirk and ask, "When will you stop playing at charity work and get a real job?" Amanda would giggle, adding, "Maybe Dad can hire you to manage his files." The laughter around the table was never with me. It was always at me. And then came the whispers about the inheritance. My grandparents, who had passed a few years back, left behind a substantial estate. I had always been close to them. They saw me for who I was, not for how much money I could make. They loved my determination and independence. But my father had control of their estate until the legal settlements were finalized. It was an open secret in the family that Amanda would receive the lion's share, because that was always how things did. When this family dinner in Chicago was supposed to be different. It was not just another Sunday gathering. It was a formal dinner where my father promised big announcements. My mother fussed over the details for weeks, making sure the dining room was perfect. The table was dressed in white linen, silver, cutlery polished until it gleamed, and crystal glasses lined up like soldiers. My father wanted a show, and I arrived with cautious hope, maybe even a sliver of excitement that, just maybe, this time he would acknowledge me. When I walked in, Amanda was already there. Draped in designer clothes my father had undoubtedly paid for, a smug grin painted across her face. My father greeted her warmly, kissed her cheek, and then turned to me with nothing more than a nod. I felt the sting, but I told myself to hold steady. This dinner was about the will. Surely tonight, justice would have its say, as the food was. Served roasted lamb, garlic mashed potatoes, and red wine. Conversation hummed around the table. Amanda dominated the chatter, laughing about her new business idea, which was little more than a boutique she wanted Dad to bankroll. My father laughed with her, praising her ambition while I quietly listened. And then somewhere, between the main course and dessert, my father cleared his throat, raised his glass, and called for silence. My pulse quickened. This was it, the announcement. The moment that could finally level the ground. But instead, he looked straight at me with that familiar, icy stare. And in front of everyone, he said the words that cut me open. "Melissa, you will never inherit a dime from me." I felt the room tilt, the air crackle, and my world fracture. You know, sometimes a single sentence can slice deeper than 1,000 insults. That night, my father's words cut straight through me. The clinking of silverware fell silent as his voice carried over the table. "Melissa," he said, pausing just long enough for every eye to land on me, "you will never inherit a dime from me." The words did not just echo, they exploded in the dining room. My chest tightened, as though the air had been punched out of me. I felt my face heat, my hands trembling under the tablecloth, the cool fabric unable to steady them. Amanda snorted first, covering her mouth as if trying to stifle laughter, but failing. She leaned toward my aunt and whispered something that made them both smirk. The laughter spread, hushed but sharp, like glass cracking in my ears. My mother's eyes darted to her plate. She lifted her fork and pushed her food around, her lips pressed tightly together. Not a word of protest, not even a look of sympathy. Her silence spoke volumes. She was not going to stand up for me. She never did. Around the table, cousins and relatives exchanged glances, murmuring under their breath. Some looked away quickly, unwilling to meet my eyes, while others leaned in, eager to see the drama unfold. I sat there, exposed and humiliated. As if I had been stripped bare under a harsh spotlight. My throat ached as I forced myself to speak. "Dad, why would you say that? After everything I've done, after everything I have worked for," his eyes cold and sharp as a blade cut through me. "Worked for? You call that charity job of yours real work? You have wasted your life, Melissa. You have contributed nothing to this family. Do not expect a reward." The room froze. Its words hung heavy in the air, pressing against my skin like lead. I put myself through school. I snapped back, my voice cracking under the weight of anger and hurt. "I built my career without your help." "I never asked for handouts." "You should have asked," Amanda interrupted with a mocking laugh. "Maybe then you would have something worth showing." The table erupted in soft laughter again. Relatives hiding their smirks behind napkins. I felt cornered, trapped like an animal with nowhere to run. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my ears. "Enough." My father's voice boomed, silencing me instantly. "This discussion is over. You will not question me in my own home. I decide what happens to this family's wealth, and I have spoken. But why humiliate me like this?" I whispered, my voice breaking. I was not even sure if he heard me. Why in front of everyone? His reply was merciless. "Because maybe now you will finally understand your place." The finality of his tone slammed into me. My stomach churned, nausea rising as I stared down at the untouched food on my plate. My hands were cold despite the fire burning in my chest. No one defended me. No one said a word. The silence of my mother, the sneers from Amanda, the murmurs from relatives, they wrapped around me like chains. Each one pulling me deeper into humiliation. Amanda leaned back in her chair, her wine glass in hand, and smirked. "Do not take it personally, Melissa. It's just money. Besides, you never really belonged in this family anyway." Her words pierced almost as deeply as my father's. My body tensed, my mind raced, 1,000 thoughts colliding in chaos. I wanted to scream, to run, to vanish, but I sat frozen, every muscle locked in place. In that moment, I felt the familiar ache of years of dismissal and neglect surge through me. The little girl who once begged for her father's approval, who worked tirelessly to prove herself, who dreamed of finally being seen, she shattered that night. Yet beneath the humiliation, something else stirred. A flicker, a spark. The tiniest ember of defiance glowed in the ashes of my shame. My father thought his words had crushed me completely. Amanda thought her laughter had buried me. The relatives thought they had witnessed the end of my place in this family. But what none of them knew, what none of them could have imagined, was that this was not the end of my story. It was only the beginning. There is a moment right after the deepest humiliation when silence feels louder than thunder. That was where I found myself. I sat at the table long after the sting of my father's words. The laughter, the whispers, even the clinking of glasses had begun to fade. But inside me, the echo roared on. My chest still felt heavy, my throat raw as though I had swallowed shards of glass. I wanted to run from that room, but something in me refused to move. I replayed every word in my mind, as if the cruelty might somehow sound different the second time. But no, it was the same. You will never inherit a dime. At first, despair consumed me. 31 years of my life dismissed in a single sentence. The little girl inside me, the one who once waited by the window for her father's approval, felt like she had just been killed in front of an audience. But slowly, beneath that crushing weight, another feeling crept in. Anger? It was not loud at first. It was quiet, steady, like a low hum beneath the floorboards. My father thought humiliation would silence me. But all he had done was awaken something that had been buried for too long, as Amanda leaned back in her chair, smug and victorious, and as my mother continued to bow her head in silence. A realization struck me with clarity. My father's arrogance had blinded him. He believed his control was absolute, that his declaration was final, that I had no power. But he was wrong because I knew something he did not, something none of them had prepared for. The image of the lawyer flashed in my mind. His words, his timing, his presence, they were not just coincidence. And for the first time that evening, my lips almost curled into a smile. I forced myself to remain composed. I let them think I was broken, shattered, humiliated beyond repair. Let Amanda bask in her victory. Let my father sit tall in his throne of control. None of them knew that the ground beneath their feet was about to shift. That dinner had started as a stage for my destruction, but it was turning into the stage for their downfall. I straightened in my chair, my heartbeat steadying. The shame was still there, yes. But now it was woven with something else. Resolve. They thought I had been silenced forever. They thought this was the end. But the lawyer was already on his way, and soon. They would learn that my story was just beginning. The sound of the front door opening was so ordinary. Yet in that moment, it felt like the crack of lightning across a dark sky. I turned my head as a tall man in a dark suit stepped into the dining room. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The laughter, the whispers, even my father's booming presence fell silent. Everyone knew this was not a casual guest. "Good evening," the man said firmly, his briefcase in hand. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I believe this gathering is the right time." My father's brows furrowed. "And who on earth are you?" he demanded, irritation dripping from every word. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, unfazed. "My name is Richard Palmer. I represent the estate of your late parents, Mr. Carter. I believe you are already aware of their will." A murmur rippled through the table. My chest tightened, but not with fear this time, with anticipation. I knew what was coming. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his usual confidence flickering for the first time. "This is not the time nor the place," Richard cut him off. "Actually, Mr. Carter, it is precisely the time and place. Because the will in question involves your children." Every eye turned to me and Amanda. She smirked at first, leaning toward me with a whisper I could almost feel on my skin. "You will not get a cent." Dad made that clear. I kept my gaze steady on the lawyer. Richard placed the briefcase on the table, opened it, and carefully unfolded a set of documents. The crisp sound of the paper slicing through the silence was deafening. "As executor of the estate, I am here to fulfill the final wishes of Margaret and William Carter," he began. "They left their home assets and inheritance not to their son, but directly to their granddaughter, Melissa Carter." For a moment, the room froze. My father's jaw dropped. Amanda's smug grin vanished. And even my mother's silence cracked as she gasped. "That is a lie," my father barked, slamming his fist against the table so hard the glasses rattled. My parents would never bypass me. Richard remained calm. "I have their signed, notarized will right here." They were quite clear. They admired Melissa's independence, her strength, and her resilience. They wished to entrust everything to her, believing she would honor their legacy. My heart pounded. I wanted to cry, to laugh, to scream, but I stayed still, letting every word sink in. Amanda shot up from her chair. "This is ridiculous. She has always been the outsider. I am the one who deserves this. Dad, say something." But for once, my father had no words. His face had drained of color, his eyes darting back and forth as if searching for an escape. The arrogance that had defined him moments earlier was dissolving into panic. Richard continued, his voice sharp and final, "Effective immediately. All property, assets, and financial holdings listed here are to be transferred to Melissa Carter. Any interference will be a direct violation of the law." Silence fell again. But this time it was mine to command. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm but unshakable. "You said I would never inherit a dime, Dad. But it seems your parents knew the truth about me all along, and they trusted me in ways you never did." The room was heavy with tension. My father's mouth opened, then closed. My mother lowered her eyes, unable to meet mine. Amanda's fists clenched, her nails digging into her palm. But she could do nothing. For the first time in my life, the power had shifted. And I did not even need to raise my voice. Richard gathered his papers, snapped the briefcase shut, and gave me a small nod. "It is done. Melissa, congratulations." The word lingered in the air like a final blow. And in that moment, their empire of control crumbled, and I was finally free. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was suffocating, heavy and merciless. My father's face turned red, then pale, then red again, as if his body could not decide between fury or humiliation. He shoved his chair back with a screech, the legs dragging against the wooden floor like claws. "This is outrageous," he thundered, his voice cracking with a desperation I had never heard before. "You cannot come into my home during my dinner and tell me my own parents betrayed me." But the words sounded weak, hollow, and pitiful compared to the booming confidence he had displayed earlier. Amanda broke next. She slammed her hand against the table, knocking over a glass of wine that spread like blood across the linen. "This is not fair. She does not deserve it. I am the one who stayed by your side, Dad." Her voice wavered between anger and panic. Relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The same aunts and uncles who had giggled when I was mocked now avoided my father's eyes. One leaned toward another and whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "Looks like William and Margaret knew what they were doing. The tide was turning." Their whispers, once sharp daggers, aimed at me, now circled back toward the very people who had humiliated me. I sat still, watching as the empire of control unraveled in front of everyone. My father's fists shook. Amanda's mascara streaked down her cheeks. Kate and my mother pressed a napkin to her lips, as if silence could shield her from shame. And it hit me then. The poetic justice of it all. The same table where I had been belittled, dismissed, and humiliated for years was now the stage of their downfall. Every relative who had witnessed my disgrace minutes earlier now watched theirs. One cousin cleared his throat and muttered, "Guess Melissa was always stronger than you gave her credit for." My father spun toward him, eyes wild, but no words came. For once, his voice, that weapon he had used to control every room, abandoned him. I leaned back in my chair, not triumphant, not cruel, but calm. I had no need to raise my voice, no need to fight anymore. The truth carried by legal words and my grandparents' faith had done what years of shouting never could. Their humiliation was not loud. It was not theatrical. It was worse. It was permanent. When the storm finally settled, I realized something powerful. Survival is not about being the loudest in the room. It is about knowing when to stand your ground and let truth do the speaking for you. For years, I'd lived in the shadow of my father's control and Amanda's favoritism. Every achievement of mine had been dismissed, every failure magnified. That night at the dinner table, it felt as if they had finally buried me under their scorn. But what they had never understood was that strength is not built in comfort. Strength is forged in fire, in silence, in the countless nights when no one believes in you but yourself. As I watched them crumble under the weight of our own arrogance, I did not feel the urge to gloat. I felt something deeper, freedom. Freedom from years of humiliation. Freedom from begging for love that was never freely given. My grandparents had seen me. Truly seen me in a way my parents never did. Their faith in me was not just an inheritance of wealth. It was an inheritance of worth. So here's what I learned. Toxic families will always underestimate the one they silence. But silence does not mean weakness. Sometimes silence is just the preparation for the loudest echo. That night, the house where I was always silenced finally echoed with my victory.